Everyone has their favorite video game. Sometimes, someone's favorite game might be a title that's less popular, and that's the case for mine. When Nintendo started advertising for their newest console, one of the initial games was set to be ARMS, a game similar to Punch-Out, with the intention being to show off the dual motion control capabilities of the Switch. Nintendo fans, and Nintendo itself, seemed to undersell the game's merit, and I certainly didn't expect to like it as much as I did. As much as I do. So, my boyfriend suggested an iceberg for this video because, in a way, this game and the story building in it are structured in a similar design. I figured to structure this iceberg in the same way as you would become familiar with a piece of media like this, with the most easily absorbable facts at the top, and all the plotline theories at the bottom. Because of this, there are things I won't mention in too much depth, those being Min Min's inclusion in Smash Bros. And the cancelled ARMS comic, because I've talked about and plan to talk about each in other videos respectively. Now, so I don't make this video any longer than it's already going to be, let's get started. The very first time that ARMS was mentioned to the public was at the Nintendo Switch presentation on January 12th of 2017. This trailer was shown after the one for 1-2 Switch. Did anyone actually buy that game? Just like 1-2 Switch, ARMS seemed to mainly be a showcase of the abilities of the Switch and its Joy-Cons. Snippets of the game would also be shown in various pre-release advertisements for the console. What made ARMS so different from other motion control games, including others like 1-2 Switch that were shown alongside it, was the fact that using both Joy-Cons in their handheld format allowed you to control two actions independent of one another. Punching with the left Joy-Con moved the left arm, and the right Joy-Con moved the right arm. This was instead of one controller being responsible for all interactive moves, like a Just Dance game on the Wii, or really any motion control game on the Wii. With a slated release date of June 16th of 2017, a proper demo of the game was in order. A free demo, dubbed the ARMS Global Test Punch, launched a month prior to the full release. Shortly after a dedicated ARMS Direct on May 17th of 2017, my birthday actually, the demo was able to be downloaded. This demo was quite limited, as you could only play within 3 one-hour time slots on weekends, with only a few characters, stages, and game modes. The first weekend, May 27th to the 28th, had 7 characters, 3 stages, and 2 game modes, counting the basic fighting mode. The second weekend, June 3rd to June 4th, added 1 more character, another stage, and 3 more game modes, however removing the initial additional game mode. This was enough to get me really interested in the game, so I made plans to use my birthday money to buy it on its release day. It was actually the first game I'd ever bought for myself. Once June 16th came around, the full game released. The base game came out with 10 characters and 10 stages. It had multiple options for online and offline play. I'll just go through them in order of how they appear on the menu. The Grand Prix is the story mode in ARMS. It plays how the classic mode in Smash Ultimate does. 1 to 2 players fight off against 9 fighters, with increasing skill and difficulty levels. Once you've beaten 9 other fighters on 9 stages, you'll reach the final boss battle against the 10th non-playable character on a non-playable stage. If you set your difficulty to 4 or above, you'll also have to face off against an additional, harder boss following the first. There is some story to this mode, which I won't spoil too much of yet, but winning the Grand Prix nets you the championship belt and garners you quite a bit of fame. Another way you can play offline is versus mode. In this game mode, you play against either a CPU or another co-op player. This mode features a few different options for fighters. Normal fights, like the ones in the Grand Prix, have you play against 1 to 3 other players. Team Fight pairs you up with a computer or a secondary player to fight against the second team of computers or other players. V-Ball is what it sounds like, you basically play volleyball. This can also be played in teams. Hoops has you fighting against your opponent with the goal of grabbing them and dunking them into a basketball hoop. There isn't a team version of this game, but there is one for Skill Shot, where you punch at targets posted between you and your opponent, with the idea of beating them to breaking them and scoring as many points as you can. Headlock Scramble gives you the objective of battling to use basically an overpowered power-up against your opponents. In Versus, you can also access 2 solo modes. 1 on 100, which is basically Century Smash, pitting you against 100 enemies, and Arms Test, a mode where your selection of arms is randomized each round. All of the multiplayer modes in Versus can also be played in ARMS online game mode, Party Match. This game mode functions as a lobby for online players looking to have casual fights for fun. The matches in this mode contain all the gimmicks and items that can be played with in Grand Prix and Versus. ARMS also has a ranked mode, which you can only have basic fights in, with no items. It also has options to lobby up with friends, both local and online. The last option for gameplay is a training mode where you can hone in on specific skills. Like any fighting game with multiple characters, the backgrounds and stories of the characters in ARMS are very important to the bigger picture of the game. ARMS gets into brutal specifics with its characters, with each one having their own distinct story, personality, and nationality, their own stage, and 3 signature arms. Starting with the poster boy of the game, Springman is a 20-year-old young man and the newest face in the Grand Prix. He is a human character with light blue eyes and similar light blue hair, coiled into a spring shape to match his spring motif. He wears predominantly white and pink clothes in an athletic style. His arms are metal coils. His dream and his main drive behind his participation is to defeat the current champion, Max Brass. The nationalities of the characters are never explicitly stated, but are heavily hinted at in terms of context and backstory. In Springman's case, it can be presumed that he's American based off his appearance, speech, and behavior. He kinda has that attitude of cockiness that other cultures attribute to being American. His stage is the Spring Stadium, owned by Springman's affiliation, the Spring Gym. His preset arms are the Toaster, Boomerang, and Tri-Bolt. The second character predominantly featured in trailers and advertisement materials, Ribbon Girl is a 17-year-old pop star whose bubbly misdemeanor complements her desire to further her stardom. Like Springman, she's a human character with white skin, blonde hair tied into a high ponytail which seems to be made out of a ribbon, and blue eyes. Her color scheme is mostly pink or magenta, and her attire of choice is a cheerleader-type dress fit for a pop star. Her arms appear to be made out of a ribbon, similar to her hair. Her stage is the Ribbon Ring, owned by her affiliation, Robonic Records. Her 3 arms are the Sparky, Popper, and Slapamander. The third playable character, and my personal favorite, is Ninjara, a 21-year-old college student studying to be a ninja. His background with his affiliation, Rasen Ninjutsu University, suggests that he's Japanese, another detail to support that being his voice lines, short Japanese phrases. His participation in the Grand Prix has the purpose of being his senior project. He has slightly tanner skin than the previous 2 fighters, bright green hair, and brown eyes. He dresses in ninja-like athletic clothing, black, blue, and green in color. His arms are made out of a chain material. His stage is the Ninja College, and his 3 arms are the Chakram, Buff, and Tri-Blast. One of ARMS' first non-human characters, Master Mummy is a large, buff mummy with dark purple skin and red eyes. his body and arms wrapped in white bandages. He's dressed in a purple wrestler singlet. His age is unknown, and despite him being a mummy, there aren't a lot of other clues to him being Egyptian or any other specific nationality for that matter. His desire to compete comes from wanting to find his lost family, with the hope that they'll see him competing and come find him. Both his affiliation and stage are the Mausoleum, and his arms are the Megaton, Retorture, and Phoenix. The second of this game's many M-named characters, Min Min is probably ARMS' most widely known character. She's 18 and works at her parents' restaurant, Nintendo Noodle House, which acts as her affiliation. She's competing in the Grand Prix with the intention of promoting the restaurant. Her nationality is a bit confusing as she's got both elements of Japan and China in her characterization. For example, her dragon motif and the written language in her stage and as her signature have the look of a Chinese influence, but the whole idea is that she's based off ramen, a Japanese cuisine. But at the same time, one of her voice lines is her saying "Lamian," the Chinese version of ramen. Her stage, the Ramen Bowl, has a theme that sounds to be based off of typical or stereotypical scores in Chinese media, so I really think she's Chinese. She has white skin, green eyes, and blonde hair and a short bob, which appears to be made out of flat noodles. Her arms are also made out of noodles, with her left one turning into a dragon when charged up. Her athletic clothes are mostly orange and green. Her three arms are the Dragon, Megawatt, and Rom. Mechanica is the first character in the roster order to be fully human, with no arms ability. Instead, she mans a yellow robotic suit with extendable arms. She's a 15-year-old with a similar skin tone to Ninjara, with brown hair and purple eyes. Her story establishes her as a lifelong fan of the Grand Prix, but as someone without the arms ability, she opted to build herself a robotic suit out of the scrap metal found in her stage, the scrapyard. This also serves as her affiliation. Her dream is simply to compete, which she overcame great odds to do. Her standard arms are the Revolver, Whammer, and Homie. Getting away from the M-names for a while, Twintel is the 7th character in the roster. She's a 26-year-old French film star with dark brown skin, aqua-colored eyes, and white hair. Rather than her arms becoming her method of combat, her hair has manifested the arms ability. She dresses in rather fashionable clothes to accent her being of a higher fame than some of her competitors. She wears basically a nice top and jeans, nothing really athletic due to her not really needing to exert herself at the same levels as other fighters. Like Ribbon Girl, her reason for fighting is to further her career. Her stage is Cinema Do, which is owned by her affiliation, Twintel Productions. Her standard arms are the Chilla, Parasol, and Thunderbird. Bite and Bark are both robots, Bite being a police robot and Bark being his dog. Bite has the appearance of a wind-up clock, his arms being windy brass-looking coils. He's mostly blue with yellow and metal accents. It's not entirely clear why they've chosen to compete, but it's suggested that they'd get a well-deserved vacation should they win. Their stage is Buster Beach, which is looked over by their affiliation, Beach Patrol. Bite's standard arms are the Siki, Cracker, and Bub. Bark's only arm is a simple boxing glove. Another non-human character, Kid Cobra, is a 19-year-old snakeboarder and online celebrity, like a YouTuber or a Twitch streamer. Unlike other non-human characters, and since he's roughly human-shaped, it's unknown what species he really is. He hides his face behind a mask, but he has one green eye and one purple eye. His arms appear to be scaly, textured like a snake. He wears black and purple skater-like clothes with baggy pants and a tight shirt. He's competing in the Grand Prix with the hopes of getting more views on his video. His stage is the Snake Park, with his affiliation being the Nausea Crew. His arms are the Slamamander, Hydra, and Coolerang. One of the strangest characters in the game, Helix is a 2-year-old test tube experiment made of a green goo, with DNA arms. He's decided he wants to compete to prove the merit of the Arms Lab's experiments, who he was created by and affiliated with. His stage is the DNA Lab, and his arms are the Blorb, Ice Dragon, and Guardian. As of version 2, the player can play as Max Brass, the Grand Prix champion. He's 52 years old, making him one of the oldest competitors. He's directly affiliated with the Arms League. Not much about his true appearance can be figured out, as he wears a fist-shaped helmet and a mask that covers up any defining features. His color scheme consists of mainly browns, navy blue, and brass. I think his drive to compete is obvious, he just wants to remain as the champion. His stage is the Sky Arena. His arms are made out of a bunch of belts, and his 3 standard weapons are the Nade, Roaster, and Kablammer. The next DLC update for version 3 introduced Lola Pop, a 23-year-old Italian street performer whose overall look is that of a clown made out of candy. She's not creepy though, I really think she's one of the cutest characters in the game. She's got a bun or a ponytail that looks like a lollipop and blue eyes. She dresses mostly in yellow and a little bit of blue, wearing big puffy clown pants and clown shoes. Her arms are made out of a candy similar to her hair. Her motive for competing is to bring more attention to her show so she can take it on the road. Her stage is Via Dolce, and she's affiliated with General Street Performers Worldwide. Her default arms are the Funchuck, Biffler, and Clapback. Version 4 introduced Misongo, a character based off of the Mayans. He wears mostly blue, gold, and orange. He's 33, and his inspiration for fighting comes from a prophecy that says he must prove that the Misongan fighting style is the best fighting style in the world. He has dark skin, brown hair, and green eyes, and his arms are made out of a woven material. His stage is the Temple Grounds, and his affiliation is the Misongans. The arms he comes with default are the Scorpio, Glusher, and the Scully. In version 4.1, Springtron, a boss from version 3.2 and onward, was made playable. He looks exactly like Springman if he were made of metal. His color palette is mostly black and bright red, and he has glowing blue eyes. His skin, arms, and hair are all the same as Springman's, although metal. His stage is the Sparring Ring, and his affiliation is with the Arms Lab. His default arms are the same as Springman's, the Toaster, Boomerang, and Tri-Bolt. The only real reason he wants to fight is to do just that, as well as to collect data for the Arms Labs. In version 5, the final playable character was added, a 48-year-old Arms Lab scientist named Dr. Coil. She dresses mostly in black and green, and she has copper-colored Tesla coils for arms. Her hair and eyes are both green. Her motive for fighting is to prove herself and her research, being one of her craziest experiments herself. She's affiliated with the Arms Labs, and her stage is name redacted. Am I supposed to say that? Am I supposed to? If the name is redacted, do I just leave it blank? Her default arms are the Lockjaw, Parabola, and the Burchuck. The way the competition plays out is how you battle through the story mode. Because of this, the story basically has many protagonists, i.e. every playable character. The Grand Prix is a worldwide event, giving everyone who wants to compete a shot at doing so. Any big event like this needs someone to arrange it. The Arms League was established long before the events of the game, rooting itself in providing a fun way to utilize the arms mutation. The league also included a research division, which would later branch off as its own institution as the Arms Labs. A little important thing to note here is that in the past, the Arms competition side and the Arms Labs were both unified under the title of the Arms Ministry. The laboratories work alongside the competitive branch of things to gather data to improve both the competition and life with the Arms team. Like every major competitive event, televisation helps make an otherwise expensive experience more accessible. Since the Grand Prix is broadcast worldwide, the competition has a large number of fans, who could be seen filling the stands and spectator spaces of almost every stage. Each fan has their favorite fighter though, which can be observed from their look, wearing what's most likely officially licensed merchandise to represent their idol. Helix even has his own drink, the bottles of which are modeled after him. Since everyone sees what happens live at the Grand Prix, everyone is familiar with Dr. Coil's dangerous invention, Headlock. This robotic, Terminator-esque sentient creature fixes itself to the head of its victim, controlling the individual and their arms, in addition to its own four. It's not clear why Dr. Coil created it, or how it got loose, if not purposely set free. Maybe it was to finally put some attention to her genius for technology.
I'm unstoppable!
The Arms Labs have been responsible for a great number of advancements in technology and in general science. If you play the 1 vs 100 mode or the training mode while you wait in the online lobby, you've probably seen the DNA men. They look and act like Helix, the only difference being that they're gray, have just one little island, and seem to be less stable, exploding once you punch them. It's not ever explicitly stated which came first, but my guess would be that Helix is meant to be some advanced form of the DNA men, since there's so many more of them than him. Helix is quite the enigma due to this difference. He was treated as a completely separate experiment, and despite his having broken free from his test tube a little early, he's sentient, has the arms ability intact, and is capable of some kind of semblance of speech. The context surrounding him suggests that he's quite an important experiment meant to help collect and process the data of the other fighters. Not all of the research that they do is public, so it's not really known where this data comes into play. The same could be said for Springtron, who was built to fulfill that same purpose, or so it's said anyway. The Arms Labs also head up research on the Arms gene, the mutation that gives many of the characters their stretchy arms. Some of the past research done on the gene can even be read in the game. While still relatively enigmatic, the gene has quite a few solid facts recorded about it. It's most usually referred to as a mutation with no real answers on where it came from or if heredity has any effect on it. It dates back thousands of years, and those that held the trait were revered by the people, given its rarity. If an individual has the gene, it will result in the manifestation of the arms ability, usually around when they reach 10 years old, but there is always the chance it will lie dormant until much later in life. The change takes place overnight and has been noted to occur in plants and animals too. The sudden change can take some getting used to, as the ability can be extremely volatile and hard to use. With the help of masks equipped with ARMS Labs tech, ARMS users can exert a little more control on their newly altered bodies. Some special cases aren't so easily accommodated to, as there are instances of the ability being present from birth, like Kid Cobra. Another strange case is Twin Tails, where her hair has taken on the ability rather than her actual arms. Efforts have been made to understand how and why this happens, and additional experimentation has been done to test the limits of the gene. Despite the incredible popularity of those with the ARMS ability, you're less likely to have it than you are not. The population predominantly lacks the ARMS gene, which leaves a lot of people in desire to find ways to obtain the ability, like Mechanica did. Other than her method of getting ARMS, the only other option is to genetically alter yourself. The only known case of this is Dr. Coils, and it isn't known exactly how many tries it took, or the mental effect it had on her. There are images in the game that give a little bit of insight to what she was like before she ran the experiment on herself. Speaking of genes, if you compare the fact that Springman has the same low health buff as Max Brass with the fact that the ARMS gene may be passed down, one might connect the dots to say that Max Brass may very well be Springman's father. In the same image that shows Dr. Coil before her transformation, you can see Max Brass with her. The whole art piece is made to look like an old photo that's been torn up. It can be deduced that her and Max Brass have a past and were possibly involved at some point. The latter could even mean that they're both Springman's parents. With these last two tiers, I'm kind of focusing on the questions that are up in the air as of the final release of the game, and the theories that fans have given the facts that were presented. A lot of the lore in ARMS is based on unanswered questions that are left up to fans to determine the answers to. Kid Cobra is clearly a rare case among his peers. He's had his arms since birth, an occurrence with a 1 in 100,000 chance of happening. He's also the only fighter in the competition that is neither human nor artificially created. His files claim that his race hasn't been confirmed, but his affiliation with the Naja crew does give us some clues. The name Naja refers to a genus of cobra that is dubbed as the true cobras. If Kid Cobra is a human-snake hybrid, that would sort of exclude him from the true cobra name. Actual snakes can be seen in artwork along with Kid Cobra, confirming that they exist in-universe. With the nod earlier that animals can carry the ARMS gene, it's entirely possible that Kid Cobra was born as, or was supposed to be born as, a normal appendageless snake. We know some basics about the Grim Creeper Master Mummy, including the fact that he was once dead, and that he's looking for his lost family. But that's pretty much it, so we're left with more questions than answers. Dr. Coil is said to have experimented on him, even being the one to have brought him back to life. But it's also said that he didn't have the ARMS ability prior to being resurrected. So what the heck did Dr. Coil do to him that changed him down to his genetics? What benefit would this kind of experimentation have in future cases? It's not ever said when he was brought back to life, before Dr. Coil's change or after, but it's a good possibility that Master Mummy was her guinea pig for the gene alteration experiment, with the side effect being that he came back to life. Another question is how his family was brought back to life. In his Grand Prix end card, he's seen reunited with his mummy wife and daughter. It brings up the question of if they were purposely brought back to life after Master Mummy was, or if they were each failed attempts at Dr. Coil's gene experimentation. You may have noticed at this point that, like Splatoon, ARMS implements a fictional written language. Characters who are intended to speak English do speak it in broken phrases like Springman and Ribbon Girl.
Springman! Boing, yeah!
I win! Ribbonista!
Characters with different nationalities, however, both speak and sign their names in their respective languages. For example, Ninjara speaks and writes in Japanese, and Min Min speaks and writes in Chinese. What this shows is that even though English has the same audible characteristics as it does in real life, the English alphabet is the only real-world script that doesn't exist in ARMS. I would really like to see how this language translates, however, it's not one-to-one like the English alphabet, and rather behaves more like a language that writes a whole word as a single character, like Japanese or Chinese. We know so much about the characters in ARMS, but we're left with little to no explanation of Biff, the announcer for the Grand Prix. He's a particularly strange case because he fits into a lot of weird categories of outlying traits. He isn't human, but it's not confirmed that he isn't artificially created either, nor does he resemble any plant or animal really. He also appears to have an extra arm on his head. I can't say for sure that they're all functional, as he's never shown actually using them in the same way as the other fighters. A strange little detail they do include is that the Misongans seem to take a particular interest in Biff, seen in Misongo's Grand Prix end card. In the notes of this gallery entry, Biff himself even states, "The Misongans were sure happy to see me for some reason." The totems in Misongo's stage are vaguely shaped like Biff's head fist, but this could just be a coincidence given that the fist motif is common all throughout ARMS. Given these details, however, I have a little theory that Biff might be a god worshipped by the Misongans, or a descendant of one, or even at least a resemblant of a god. Another thing I realized is that Misongo's little spirit guy has a similar cross pattern on its face like Biff does. This spirit could possibly be his ancestor, a god, or otherwise religious figure. In the ARMS Lab's Confidential 1, images and text from 1500 years prior are depicted, one in particular showing an image of 3 people with the ARMS ability in a medieval style. One of these people looks like Biff, and with the context of it being a medieval document, it makes sense to consider a religious point of view for the artwork, making this more evidence in support of Biff being something that transcends the other in-universe species. This is the strongest theory I have, so it's a little long, so bear with me. Helix's main motivation for participating in the Grand Prix is to, quote, prove the merit of the ARMS Lab's research. Springman exhibits a similar desire to prove himself, and in a roundabout way, Helix putting a good name to the lab's research is his way of proving his own worth. Why would Helix have that far of a developed thought process if he's only ever experienced life in a test tube? He would need to have been previously let out or fed the information, the latter of which is more reasonable because his Grand Prix end card shows him breaking out of his tube forcibly rather than being let out. His body language in this artwork suggests some kind of existential or deep thinking, perhaps questions of his existence and purpose. Again, how could he have these thoughts unless he has or was designed with prefabricated thought? Eventually, Helix's data is referenced to create Springtron, who is a faithful replication of Springman. How could this be a one-to-one comparison when Springtron has such a specific purpose? Helix's fighting style and ability are both wildly different from Springtron. What information could be taken from Helix and applied to a copy of someone who already exists, if he isn't a copy himself? Springtron is said to have had to be allowed to step out of the shadows, a statement that solidifies that he was always kinda a shady project, and also suggests that Helix was too, since he physically had to escape the lab. Why would they be so shady and mysterious if they're simple research and tech projects? Biff even mentions that Springtron may have been built based on blueprints that were stolen from Mechanica. Why would Dr. Coyle need this if the very first intention behind her research was to create a robot of Springman? She was able to create another robot prior all on her own, and gave herself robotic weapons, so her having to steal blueprints seems very last resort of her. Dr. Coyle also refers to Helix as a disappointment, but if his information could be used viably and produce something successful, it suggests that this wasn't his main purpose to begin with. So what was it? In the notes of the Helix Awakes artwork, Biff mentions that someone at the ARMS lab reported that Helix broke out of his chamber earlier than planned, which could possibly mean he never finished developing into whatever he was meant to be. If Dr. Coyle really is Springman's mother and Max Brass's ex-lover, the pain of the strain between her and her family may have left her yearning for her son's presence in her life, and therefore an alternative to the real thing in the form of a clone, something I think Helix was supposed to be. In an effort to understand every piece of information there is to know about ARMS, the ARMS labs have been known to resort to any means necessary to procure said information. For example, Twintel has turned down multiple of the lab's requests for samples of her hair, although they still try to attain it in secrecy. The ice cream man is going around, should I get something? Anyway, Kid Cobra is another victim of this close studying, and there's even a whole ARMS Labs Confidential that focuses solely on his information. They write that investigation of him must be prioritized, a hard task given that he isn't forward with his personal life or information, even going as far as to hide his face entirely. This doesn't slow the labs down, as it's also stated in the game that an investigator is currently shadowing one of these outliers. That outlier being Kid Cobra, on account of his strange genetics, which allowed him to attain the ARMS ability with material not really linked to him, or rather purported not to be linked to him. With the evidence that we do have on Kid Cobra, an explanation that could fit his odd attributes could be that he's a special case of two separate rare occurrences. One being that he was an animal, in this case a snake, that happened to have the ARMS gene, and the other being that he's a case where the ability manifested itself earlier in life. It would also explain why he's so secretive about his family too, as they'd still just be normal snakes. If what the ARMS gene does to animals always changes them in the same way as Kid Cobra, it can be concluded that the ARMS gene makes several alterations to the physical makeup of a species, especially considering that not all animals with the gene have the ability set in at birth like Kid Cobra. So if you think about it, that has the potential of being a pretty horrific change. The way that all the fighters with the natural ARMS ability keep a handle on their arms is by wearing a special mask issued by the ARMS labs. The labs provide these masks free to anyone who has the ability, but given their other shady attempts at research, you really have to consider this offering as a Trojan horse. In the Arms Lab's Confidential number 8, it's mentioned that the technology used in the masks is kept very secret to prevent their misuse. If the masks only serve the purpose of making life easier, making it easier to control your arms, in what capacity could they be misused? One possibility is that they can be overused, restricting the power of the ability a bit too much. But given the social view of arms bearers in ancient societies, maybe the intended purpose of the mask is to restrain an even more intense power. The Arms Labs are oddly adamant about giving masks to those who need them, as you're pressured to call the labs up should you develop the trait. Even if you consider some of the more religious undertones of some of the documents and details in the game, it makes that even more plausible. Science will always try to explain a religious occurrence, which explains the lab's past as a ministry, and their unwavering desire to explain everything about the arms ability. That could very well be a power bestowed upon all living beings by gods. So that's it. Even with an iceberg video, there's no better way to experience the world of arms than actually playing the game. For some criminal reason, it's still full price on the eShop, but you can get a used physical copy for way cheaper, I guarantee it. I love this game with all my heart, and I find myself unarchiving it often so I can play a few rounds. I used to have so many screenshots of it clogging up my Switch. It's funny now, but anyway. Please support this game in any way you can. It has so much potential, and it still has a fairly active, dedicated fanbase, including myself. Hello, I would just like to thank you for watching this video. I know that arms is something very niche and very odd, like nobody ever talks about it anymore. I feel like the only times people talk about it is to say something bad about it or to just like compare it to Punch-Out. Fun fact about ARMS, there was supposed to be Punch-Out characters in it, but they pivoted last minute because they didn't want to have to explain how the stretchy arms thing would have to work. So they created a whole world and new characters revolved around that ability. I think ARMS is infinitely interesting, and I could go on and on about it. The reason why I chose just to do a lore iceberg is because that's something I'm very knowledgeable about. But anyway, thank you again for watching, and I hope this taught you a little more, or like at least gave you a little bit of interest about ARMS. Even I didn't expect to like it this much, and maybe if you give the game a chance on your own, you might have that same thing happen to you. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.
Until next time, fighting fans.